Well, everybody, I think we're just about to start this webinar, which is something that we should all pay more attention to. It's about the militarization of space. Now then, my name is Pippa Bartolotti, and I'm going to be your moderator. I'd like to thank UNAC for hosting this webinar on behalf of Global Women United for Peace Against NATO. And as we know, NATO is a nuclear armed state, a nuclear armed group of states, I should say. Almost all nuclear armed states are spending billions on upgrading their nuclear weapon systems, sometimes by integrating them with new and untested technologies. Many of those technologies rely on that place we call sky. Beyond our suffering planet is an equally suffering atmosphere we call outer space, a once perfect vacuum filled with plasma radiation and dust, now polluted with junk and so many satellites, it is hard for astronomers to see the stars. This cavalier attitude towards the last remaining area usable by weapons manufacturers creates new risks of accidents and misinterpretations. Worse, it fuels a dangerous arms race between supposed adversaries who are constantly adjusting to each other's threats, real or perceived. Weapons intruding into space are harmful and unwanted escalation and must be opposed. Our speakers will tell you much, much more. And first, I'd like to introduce Bruce Gagnon. Bruce is the coordinator of the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. He was co-founder of the Global Network when it was created in 1992. In 1987, he organized the largest peace protest in Florida history when over 5,000 people marched on Cape Canaveral in opposition to the first flight test of the Trident II nuclear missile. So, Bruce, if you're ready, I will hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. Appreciate being invited to talk today. All righty. Today, the U.S. Space Force is in charge of dominating the Earth. And what we know is that space technology, space satellites, allow the U.S. to see everything on the planet Earth and target everything, intercept all communications around the Earth as well. And so they can fight on the air, the land, the sea, and through space, all coordinated by military satellites. In this document on the left, Vision for 2020, they talked about the United States would control space, dominate space, and deny other countries the use of space. And to the right is inside of Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado, the Space Wing, Space Command headquarters, and you see the logo, Master of Space. And it's important to remember that in this planning document, Vision for 2020, was published in 1997. And it was the year 2020 that Trump and the US Congress created the Space Force, sort of right on schedule. The Democrats at that time controlled the House. They could have defeated the Space Force proposal. But all they wanted to do was change the name to the Space Corps, like the Marine Corps, rather than the Space Force. And they didn't even fight for that. They caved on that one as well.
Your slides aren't advancing. Ask them if they're...
No, they're advancing. Today, this is a picture of, on the left, of Esrange in northern Sweden. And they lead the all Intel, it's an Intel center for the US and NATO. It's a leading Intel center up in the high north.
Bruce,
Yeah,
Bruce, could I just interrupt a moment? Your slides are not advancing, so we need to put this into presentation mode.
let me make sure how to do that. Tell me if they are now. Are they advancing now?
No,
Are
not
they
yet.
advancing?
No.
This is crazy.
Did you try the button at the bottom right? Or the logo, I should say,
Yeah,
at the bottom
yeah, I
right?
just tried that.
The
I
one on
just
the
tried
far
that.
right of the screen there?
Yeah, I did try that. Let me try something else. How about now?
No, I'm sorry, that's not happening. We got it going before. Can you just move your cursor down to the next slide down, maybe, and just highlight it on your left-hand side?
Does that work?
Yes, that worked.
All right, I'll do that. Okay, very quickly, this is the picture where I was talking about space technology coordinates all warfare on the Earth. On the left is the planning document from the Space Command, published in 1997. On the right is the US Space Force, the Space Command at that time, Master of Space logo outside their headquarters building. On the left is a big radar up in the Esrange in northern Sweden. And Esrange is now the leading intel center for the US and NATO, able to intercept all communications from Russia that they then share with the US. On the right is a X-37 military space plane that is a super drone. It has been able to stay in orbit for an entire year at a time. When the US Space Command and Space Force have their annual computer war game that they call the Red Team versus the Blue Team, where they practice first strike attacks on Russia and China. It's the X-37 military space plane that flies down from orbit and drops an attack on Russia and China. They're working on building many of them right now. On the left is a picture of the Globus radars right along the Russian-Norway border. I don't know if you can see the map. I think the pictures of us are in the way, but right on the Russian-Norway border is this center that intercepts all communications and targets a first strike attack using various US missile systems on Russia. And so imagine if Russia had such a radar system right on the Canada-US border overlooking the United States. It was a key element in preparing first strike attack against the United States. Well, you can imagine our country would go nuts over that. On the left is a picture from Romania where the United States has built a first strike attack launch center where they can launch cruise missiles, Tomahawk cruise missiles, that would reach Russia, Moscow, for example, in just a matter of minutes. And they've also built one in Romania. So these two places now have the sword that can lunge into the heart of Russia from neighboring countries. And then they also have their SM-3 missile defense interceptors, the same interceptor missiles that are on Aegis destroyer warships, and they are the shield. So after the first strike sword is launched against Russia, when they try to retaliate, the so-called missile defense shield would be used to pick off any response from Russia. So again, Russia is being encircled by these systems. The graphic on the right is the various bases around Europe where US has nuclear weapons on NATO bases. Trump has now talked about creating the Golden Dome that would cost the United States $550 billion, up to trillions of dollars, according to the Congressional Budget Office, over the next 20 years. The American Physical Society says that to intercept just 10 ICBMs from another country would require 30,000 space-based interceptors in low Earth orbit, if you can imagine that. Imagine the cost of that. Currently, there are 12,000 active satellites in low Earth orbit, mostly Starlink, put there by SpaceX. So imagine 30,000 interceptors in low Earth orbit. To understand the US space program, you have to go back to World War II. At the end of World War II, when under Operation Paperclip, the United States smuggled 1,500 Nazi operatives into the US, including Wernher von Braun, who ran the Nazi missile program. Von Braun and his team had inside a tunnel in a place called Dora. They had an encampment for Jews and gypsies and communists, homosexuals, even a Black American GI were there. And they were building these V1 and V2 rockets for the Nazi effort. So after the war, they were brought to Huntsville, Alabama, where they created the US space program. Von Braun and his 100 members of his rocket team, engineers and scientists from Germany, along with 100 copies of the V2 rocket. So this was the essential building of the US space program. And then in the early 1960s, the United States launched its first nuclear device into space. And so since at that time, there have been a series of nuclear launches over the years by the United States, some of which have fallen back to Earth, burned up on reentry, and spread deadly plutonium and or uranium around the world. Right now, NASA is working on a nuclear rocket to get to Mars, and they want to test it in lower Earth orbit. They want to test the engines because they've said that hey, we can't test the engines on Earth because it'll spread too much in the event of an accident. It'll spread all kinds of nuclear debris. So we'll do it in lower Earth orbit. But what happens if this test of this nuclear rocket engine falls back to Earth, burns up on reentry in the Earth atmosphere? So the global network created in 1992 has allies and member organizations all over the world. On the left is a picture from a conference in South Korea not too long ago where I was speaking. They organized a speaking tour for me all over the country. And on the right is a picture from a campaign for nuclear disarmament in Britain that is a longtime member of the global network. On the left is a picture from Visakhapatnam, India, where just last October, they held a series of events in their city at various colleges and throughout the city, talking about the dangers of militarizing space. And on the right is a picture from people in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where Kirtland Air Force Base is heavily involved in the US warfighting space program. On the left is a picture from last October, again during Keep Space for Peace Week from New Zealand, where they protested a big aerospace conference. And on the right is another event during Space Week from Asheville, North Carolina. On the left is a picture of some of us in Maine. This was during the second annual Maine Space Conference that we were protesting against. And they are now working to build a space launch facility somewhere near Acadia National Park, one of the most beloved national parks in the country. And at the same time, they're talking about doing hypersonic missile testing from up in that part of the state. So we've been trying to do everything we can to stop this. Two communities have now had elections at their town meetings up in the northern part of Maine to say that they do not want any missile launches, rocket launches from their community. On the right is one of my all-time favorite pictures of Lindis Percy outside of Menwith Hill, a US NSA base up in Yorkshire in England. And she's protesting outside this place that intercepts all phone, fax, email communications from all of Europe, and also is involved in drone targeting. Increasingly, because of all the launches, the congestion in lower Earth orbit, scientists are saying that they fear there's going to be collisions up there. There's growing problems with space debris. And a scientist by the name of Kessler has created a theory called the Kessler syndrome, saying that it won't be long that they're going to have cascading collisions in lower Earth orbit to the point that we will essentially go dark here on the Earth with everything that so many things that we do. We're hooked up to satellites, and we will lose contact with them. In 1989, Edgar Mitchell, one of the Apollo astronauts, when the early moonwalkers came and spoke at a protest we organized in Florida outside of Cape Canaveral. And he said that if there is such a Kessler syndrome, and there is a war in space or this cascading collisions in space, that we'll be entombed to the planet. We won't be able to get a rocket off the Earth through this minefield surrounding the planet. At the same time, every time you launch a rocket, the carbon dioxide rises up into the atmosphere from this pollution from the engines and is punching a greater hole in the ozone layer. We're often told that much of the launches that are going on around the world are being done to study the environment, to go up and look at the ozone layer. But in fact, every time they do these launches, they're creating a bigger problem. For many years, Russia and China have been going to the United Nations General Assembly, introducing a resolution called PEROS, Prevention of an Arms Race in Outer Space. And it's voted on at the General Assembly as a resolution. And it passes overwhelmingly with US and Israel and maybe one or two little tiny countries that US controls voting no. It's then sent to the Permanent Conference on Disarmament in Geneva to create the negotiations for the actual treaty. And there, the United States and Israel have been blocking it for about 30 years. So until we close the barn, close the door to the barn so the horse doesn't get out, we're not ever going to be able to stop the militarization and weaponization of space. So we must all be calling for a global ban on weapons in space. Through American Republican and Democrat administrations, both parties, when in power, have blocked this treaty. So the United States is clearly, along with NATO, planning for war with Russia, as they now have done in Ukraine, and also with China. On the right is a RAND Corporation study talking about unbalancing Russia. Russia has the largest border with the Arctic, and because of the melting of the Arctic ice due to climate change, the resource extraction corporations want to go up and drill in the region. And this is the reason why they've been long talking about breaking Russia up into smaller countries. This is, I think, evidence of this whole thing, that the US Navy has been preparing for warfare in the Arctic region for a long time. And every year the US and its NATO allies have war games up in the Arctic region, preparing to take control of the region, largely away from Russia. During the Clinton administration, Bill Clinton started what was called NATO enlargement, or NATO enhancement, they often called it. And since then, we've seen NATO on steroids, moving increasingly closer and closer and closer to Russia. Sweden and Finland now joining, and most recent members. And Ukraine was to be a member of NATO under this program and this war program, this proxy war program that the US and NATO started. And now NATO is even moving into the Asia Pacific by bringing countries from that region in as NATO partners. And in Japan and in South Korea, the US Space Force has now created installations in those two countries, pulling those nations into the US warfighting space program. And throughout the entire Asia Pacific region, countries are being militarized with growing numbers of bases, US bases, Guam, expanding bases, Philippines, new bases, Okinawa, expanding bases. And throughout this island chain that you see here on the left, we see these major expansion, largely of missile launch facilities that would be able to fire missiles into China. So, there's often talk in the United States about Russia being the evil leader of militarizing space. And they also throw China into that as well. But I think when you look at this graphic here, you see that the United States has always been the leader of the militarization of space. With China and Russia, look at Russia, the fourth one down, virtually nothing in comparison to what the United States has been spending on space programs and military space programs over the years. So clearly, the militarization, the nuclearization of space is a fundamental problem. And it's a fundamental danger that will, in fact, if allowed to proceed, will bring us to a final nuclear war, something that we really can't afford. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Bruce. That was fascinating. And to hear you put numbers in terms of dollars on the expenditure of space militarization, that's where all the American social services have gone, where the education has gone, where the infrastructure build has gone. And if such a war would ever start, I don't think there'd be enough money to actually sustain it. But, it seems to me that they use 1984 as a roadmap and don't treat it as a piece of fiction, and that leaves us all in danger. So thank you so much, Bruce, for that. Our next speaker is Tamara Lorincz. Tamara has recently achieved her PhD, so huge congratulations to Tamara. She's a long-time active member of WILF Canada and the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace. Tamara campaigns for Parliament to cut military spending and invest in urgent social programs and climate action. She wants the federal government to put peace and justice at the centre of Canada's foreign policy and to end all wars. So, Tamara, for all the fantastic work you do, we're really looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Pippa. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to be with you all. I'm speaking to you from Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. This is traditional Six Nations territory. And also a big thank you to the Global Women United for Peace Against NATO for organizing this webinar. And I would also like to express my deep appreciation to Bruce Gagnon for leading the global network against weapons and nuclear power in space. He's helped us a lot in Canada, keep Canada out of ballistic missile defense 20 years ago. And we're going to need to really ramp up our mobilization for peace now. So I'm going to share my slides here. I'm just going to bring it up. And here we go. Hopefully you can see them okay. So I'm going to begin by talking about a couple of recent developments from the United States and NATO. Then I'm going to focus on Canada, space, and the connection to the Arctic. I will also talk about Canada's new Arctic over-the-horizon radar system and our planned participation in Trump's Golden Dome. I will end by talking about space war profiteering and the US-NATO plan for global war and how we are resisting and working for peace in Canada. I'm happy to share my slides and resources, so please just send me an email and it's there on my slides. So this year marks the 6th anniversary of that the Trump administration launched the US Space Force, a separate branch of the US military. 2 weeks ago, US Space Force released its new strategy, Space Force Vector, and it states, quote, ultimately, our vector is to embody our transformation into a warfighting service, build combat readiness within each mission area, and employ the capabilities we need to secure space superiority for the joint force and our nation. So the focus is very much on warfighting and maintaining superiority in space. It is not about peace and cooperation. A week ago, the Trump administration released its national security strategy, and this re-articulates the focus on war, and it states, quote, we want to recruit, train, equip, and field the world's most powerful, lethal, and technologically advanced military to protect our interests. We want the world's most robust, credible, and modern nuclear deterrent, plus next generation missile defenses, including Golden Dome, for the American homeland to protect the American people, American assets overseas, and American allies. So here you see that in the national security strategy, Golden Dome is integral to the US plan for military domination. On NATO and space militarization, well, in 2019, when Trump launched US Space Force, NATO recognized space as the 5th operational domain and launched its overarching space policy. Then 2 years later, France announced that it would host NATO's new Space Center of Excellence in Toulouse, and this new center became operational 2 years ago. Last month, the NATO Space Center of Excellence hosted a big wargaming conference. Again, the focus is on war. In terms of Canada and space, 3 years ago, Canada established a new space division following the lead of the US, and this Canada Space Division is embedded within the Royal Canadian Air Force, and Canada's space strategy is very much connected to the Arctic. And I just want to show you a graphic here. This is an image from the US's Arctic strategy. And you can see Canada there on the left and Greenland, and you can see Russia on the right. And you can see how Russia has about 50% of the Arctic territory. Well, the three military institutions that are governing this area on the left, Canada and the United States and the NATO allies, the three of them are the US Northern Command. This is dominated by the United States. Then we have the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD. This is the binational defense partnership between the US and Canada that was established in 1958. And then you've got NATO's northern flank, which is comprised of the US, Canada, and its allies. So this is connected to space and cyberspace and with the Arctic. And you can see here, this makes up the northern flank, and it's very much targeted against Russia. Now, 3 years ago, the NATO Secretary General came to Canada's Arctic. This was the first time a NATO Secretary General had come to Canada's Northern Territories, and he went to see these Globus domes that Canada also has in our Northern Territories. Then he went to Cold Lake, Alberta to see Canada's largest Air Force base, where the new F-35 fleet will be stationed, because the F-35s will also be integrated into this into all of this space Arctic militarization. And it was at this time that Canada announced a $38 billion program to modernize NORAD, which will be a multi-layered military infrastructures, sensors, installations, missile launch systems, warships, Arctic drones, and tactical helicopters integrated from the ground, sea, space, and cyberspace, all in partnership with NATO. This military modernization is detailed in Canada's new defense update that was released last year, entitled Our North Strong and Free, and it describes military readiness and warfighting. On the right is a graphic from Canada's Department of National Defense social media, and you can see that it says Canada's protecting NATO's northern flank, and then it says it's protecting and deterring aggression, protecting the Arctic, and responding to climate change. All of this military modernization, the militarization of space and the Arctic, is extremely environmentally destructive and will exacerbate climate change. So this is one of the reasons why we very much oppose it. Now, soon after Mark Carney became Prime Minister, he announced that he would boost Canada's military footprint in the Arctic. Then he went up to Iqaluit, Nunavut, to announce that Canada would partner with Australia on a new military radar system called the Arctic Over-the-Horizon Radar. And then shortly after that, Canada's Department of National Defense announced that there would be public consultations on this new Arctic Over-the-Horizon Radar system. And I participated in the public consultations on behalf of the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom Canada. I'm members of both organizations that are working very hard in this country for peace. And this is a map of the province of Ontario. And just to orient yourselves, we've got Detroit here at the bottom, then we have Toronto here, and up here in North Bay is where you have the Canadian Forces Base North Bay, and just a little bit south is where you're going to have 4 radar sites in Ontario. Now, this North Bay military base will be the control center for the Arctic Over-the-Horizon Radar system. And it's known as 22 Wing Canadian Forces Base, but it is also a permanent American military detachment that is linked to US Space Force and US Air Force. So these are also American detachments. And it is here that CFB North Bay will coordinate with NORAD, and NORAD is headquartered at the Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs. So this is very much integrated across North America and through the Arctic, as I showed on the map. And this is what the Arctic Over-the-Horizon radar system looks like. This is what was presented by the Department of National Defense at the public consultations. And the Canadian military says that this radar system is needed for Canada and the US to conduct surveillance over the horizon in the Arctic for continental defense. The system will bounce radar beams off the ionosphere to see over the curvature of the Earth and detect objects approaching and entering Canadian airspace up to 3,000 kilometers away. And the cost of this Arctic Over-the-Horizon Radar system is approximately $6 billion. Now, as I explained, Canada is partnering with Australia in building this radar system. And this is a picture of Australia's Jindalee operational radar network known as JORN. And it's the BAE Systems and it's BAE Systems, the big British weapons giant, and Lockheed Martin, the big American weapons giant, that are the main contractors for JORN. So this radar system that Canada is going to be buying and building will be with these weapons manufacturers. We're going to be building 2 receiving sites and 2 transmitting sites, and thousands of acres of prime farmland and wetland will be destroyed to build this Arctic Over-the-Horizon Radar system. It is not needed to exert Canada's sovereignty or keep Canadians safe. In fact, it makes us less safe and it makes us poorer. That $6 billion is not invested in things that Canadians desperately need, like housing, healthcare, and education. It really is about enriching the military-industrial complex and preparing for global war. Now, this system will also be linked to Trump's Golden Dome. And this is a missile defense and surveillance system that will not work. MIT expert Ted Postal said that Golden Dome cannot work because of this decoy problem, and it will only pad the pockets of weapons manufacturers. It's a boondoggle, but Canada wants to join it, and it's going to cost us another $61 billion US. So it's really important that we stop Golden Dome. Now, this space domination by the military is very much related to corporate space profiteering. Last year, Canada's big accounting firm, Deloitte, released a report called Reaching Beyond, a $40 billion space economy in Canada by 2040. And the graph shows the number of satellites, probes, and landers that have been launched every year from 1957 to 2022. And you can see this huge recent spike in the past few years. And it also means a spike in space debris, and something we can talk more in the question and answers. Another graph in the report shows how the United States dominates the space assets. So of the top 15 countries that launched space assets last year, the US leads with over 7,000. Then you have Russia at about 3,000, China at 900. And of the top 15 countries, 8 are NATO members and 3 are NATO allies. So it's the West that dominates space. And if you read carefully the report, you can see that it's corporations that want governments to pay the upfront cost, invest use public dollars to socialize the risk, to invest in their R&D, but it's corporations that want to benefit and to privatize the profits. Now, why the US and NATO are pursuing the space superiority and focusing on warfighting is very much what Bruce said. It is about preparing for global war. So last month on November 7th, the US Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, gave a very disturbing but important speech called The Arsenal of Freedom in Washington, D.C. And he outlined how the US is putting the country on a war footing and ramping up weapons production. And all of the NATO allies, including Canada, are doing the same thing. This is why we're increasing military spending to 5% of GDP. That same week, the NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte, said at the NATO Industry Forum in Bucharest, Romania, that Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea are preparing for long-term confrontation. But this is a lie. It is the US and NATO that is preparing for global war against them. Make no mistake, the US and NATO allies are preparing for global war, despite what Trump talks about, ending wars and getting these peace prizes. It's pure deception. They are preparing for global war against Russia, China, North Korea, and Venezuela, and they are dividing the labor between them. So Canada, as I explained in a previous map, will be responsible for the northern flank. This map that I prepared shows in the red circle are the 32 countries of NATO. The brown dots are representing the 750 US and NATO military bases that are encircling Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and Venezuela. And you can see the proxies in purple: Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. But there is hope. We are resisting. This is a picture of VOW and WILP Canada with our banner outside the US Embassy in Ottawa. We are opposed to the militarization in the north. We are calling on Canada to get out of NORAD, to get out of NATO. We want the Arctic to be a zone of peace and cooperation with the Indigenous peoples across all of the northern nations, which is what they want. The communities in Ontario are also resisting, and they are opposed to the Arctic over-the-horizon radar sites. They set up a group called Clearview Resident Owners Against Radar, ROAR. It's such a great acronym. And so they're really, they're very, very worried about how these radar sites will harm their livelihoods, their land. I mean, this is farmland that's feeding people, how it's going to affect their property values. They're also really worried about their health and their children's health and the impact on the environment, because these are sites of endangered species and wetlands and migratory birds. And they also have a parliamentary petition. And if you are Canadian, I encourage you to sign the petition. I'll put it in the chat in just a few moments. And then finally, I have published an article in the latest Space Alert. I really encourage you to go to the website Space for Peace and download the newsletter. My article is in it. And there's also lots of other great articles. And I also this past summer published an opinion piece that got printed in several newspapers across the country, calling for Canada not to join Golden Dome. So I'll put a link in the chat for that as well. Friends, we need to work together to abolish NATO, to get Canada out of NORAD. We need peace in space. We need peace in the Arctic. Let's stick together and make this possible. Thank you very much.
Tamara, that was amazing. My goodness, did you draw breath? There was so much information in there. I think I would be glad to watch this again and gather more. But I mean, as you say, I mean, this idea of this NATO-Canada relationship to protect the Arctic is really about militarizing the Arctic. And as you so properly highlighted, this is about weapons manufacturers making money. Throughout the wars on Gaza and in Ukraine, the market shares of all the weapons companies has gone up. The shareholder, are just rubbing their hands with glee. And of course, this is our money. This is taken out of our wages. This is money that should be reinvested in the communities. But it's all part of a grand plan to leach as much money out of ordinary people into the pockets of the very, very few. And that's capitalism, and that needs to stop. Well, thank you so much. We'll be, before I introduce our next speaker, I just want to say that we have a question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. I see there's already 3 questions in it. Please put your questions in that. It'll be easier for me to pick them out later rather than put them in the chat, which can actually be quite long. So please do that. We only have 15 minutes, so please make your questions succinct, and we'll see how many we can get in. Well, our next and final guest is Agneta. Agneta Norberg is a Swedish peace activist. As vice president of the Swedish Peace Council, she proposed making the North a zone of peace. And she has opposed NATO militarization against Russia. She was arrested at the 1996 Nevada nuclear test site and has organized the peace march to Russia during the Cold War. So Agneta has been a wonderful activist for more years than probably I know. The floor is yours, Agneta. You must unmute if possible.
Yes, I'm so impressed by what I've seen that Bruce and Tamara has shown in wonderful pedagogic slides. Why I feel a little bit embarrassed. I don't have any such pictures. I have only myself and my mouth. And I asked Pippa if she could show the picture. Have you succeeded in finding it, or could we publish it? Oh, wait.
Yes,
wait.
I have. And Agneta, if you wouldn't mind, just tell us when you want us to put them up. And my backroom staff Joe Lombardo will put them on the screen.
Yeah, I will be much shorter, and I would say I'm the grassroots, really the grassroots, who has been climbing over fences, been arrested, and been caught by the police and dragged into. Yes, I know Bruce and I were together, and I think Tamara is also. So we are some who have practically, so to say, resisted against this horrifying military build-up, where this peaceful, calm Sweden has become one of the most aggressive war hawks, I would say, in the world, because we are so close to Russia. So why the United States of America has been forcing, I think, I cannot believe that they did it themselves, free will. We have now 17 US bases in the former neutral, non-aligned country. 17. This is just so dangerous and outrageous. I am invited to speak about Esrange. When I talk about Esrange, many in Sweden has never heard about it, and they don't know. What are you saying? Esrange? What is that? Oh my God. So we have in our soil, in the north of Sweden, the world's biggest downloading, or one of the world's, some say, but I think it's one of the world's biggest downloading station on Earth. That is in the northern Sweden. It was built in 1962. Well, I take the paper and read here. The expansion of space and aviation industry shall be one of the driving forces for Swedish growth and position as a high technology nation. When was this said? In 2005. So Sweden has been in this for a long time. And we have been very active in inviting United States of America. So now we are, I would say, occupied, as I said, about the 17 bases, but I think it's important to stress that this high chief, where I forgot his name, has been in US in space, and high profession has been in Esrange and advised how Esrange will continue, and also that NATO and Esrange is now within NATO. So will you please just show the picture of the Esrange rocket station? It's not any fantastic, but it is extremely dangerous. Do you have the picture?
Coming up now. That's not the picture we want. Just give us a minute and we'll come up with the right one. I can see them there. Seems to be taking a while to load.
What is this?
Well, when we were in the practice, when we were in the practice session, it all loaded up perfectly. I can see the 3 pictures, but they don't seem to be coming up onto our screen.
Then I continue. I continue?
You
Because
continue whilst,
well,
yeah.
I don't have that much to say because I think we have short of time, so I will limit my intervention here. But the most important is, as I said, that General Chance Saltzman, there I have him, that in that respect, I am fully, how should I say, I suspect that the United States, as they have been always there since I think the beginning, are now running Esrange. So what is then Esrange? It's downloading station from satellites, as I said, and it can also launch rockets. And the most important thing now to destroy China's and Russian satellites is you can launch mini satellites from Esrange, and they are proved or constructed in Angstrom laboratories in Uppsala already in 2005. They brought them to Pentagon so they could produce these mini satellites. They are small like this, can be used in launching and destroying other enemy countries' satellites. That is the new weapon that Esrange has admitted they will start doing this 2027. Thank you. Did you have a picture or it didn't come up? No. So I think I will end up with the Swedish Minister of Defense, Paul Johnson, has offered, as I said, the United States 17 Swedish bases, but he has also admitted that they can be in Esrange at any time. And in 2024, the Swedish government decided to enlarge the space base to enhance the Swedish defense capabilities for 1 billion Swedish kronor. I couldn't find how much is 1 billion Swedish kronor, but it is rather much. I'm not sure how much it is in dollar, but it is not cheap. And I think I will end up here that the United States plans to launch military satellites from Esrange. And our Swedish space commander, Jonas Wikman, said, and I can end up with this to see where we are now in Sweden, said that he was very proud to have the possibility to cooperate with United States of America. So there we are. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Agneta. And I do apologize for the pictures not coming up. We can see Joe's desktop at the moment, which isn't very useful. But that was very interesting. The Swedish perspective and the Esrange launching site is something that very few people know or understand. So thank you for shedding lots of light on that. Now I'm going to the Q&A section, and we have a few minutes. So we will see, I think, Liz Remerswal, who is from New Zealand, I happen to know, is saying, what's the best way of alerting the community to the dangers of expanding technology in space when it is so glamorized and people aren't aware of the dangers? It's expanding in many countries, including Asia Pacific, including New Zealand, and is a great concern. So so what she's saying is, what do we, the panel, think is the best way of alerting the community to these dangers? I think I could start with, well, are you all happy to answer this, Bruce? Would you be happy to take that first of all?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you have to look around in your own community, in your own country, and determine what role your country is playing. Any country that is allied to the United States right now, whether it's through NATO or Five Eyes or other kind of coalitions like that, is involved. The United States, years ago in one of the industry publications called Space News, they said that warfare program in space would be the largest industrial project in the history of the planet Earth. The US can't afford to pay for it. We're $37 trillion in debt. And so the United States, in the vision for 2020 that I showed you earlier, published in 1997, they said in there, we've got to get the allies involved in this program. And the reason fundamentally is two. One is to help pay for it, but the other is to have downlink stations and missile launch facilities spread out around the world. So when it comes to wartime with Russia, you could literally fire missiles from virtually dozens and dozens of countries at Russia or China or whatever. So I like to show this thing here. The United States is bringing all these countries into this space warfighting program as partners, but the United States will be in charge of the tip of the spear. We learned during the war on Yugoslavia that it was a NATO war, and I read in Aviation Week and Space Technology magazine that Europeans were really angry at the US because the US was not providing any satellite reconnaissance information about what the NATO bombing looked like, because the United States was in charge of the tip of the spear. And that's the way it will be under the present conditions as well. So find out what's in your country, begin to learn about it, get people involved. Read our newspaper, Space Alert, which Tamara just put on the chat. There's a link right to it. And also go to the Global Network YouTube page, which over the period of some years now, we posted many, many, many different space videos. And we also have many of these space videos on our website as well in the resource section, and share them with others in your community so that people can learn. These space videos we have literally covered from A to Z, every aspect, and they're not very long. They're usually quite short. And so this is one way that we can get people to learn more about it. And then finally, during Keep Space for Peace Week, which is held usually about the first week of October every year, hold some activities in your community to bring people into the issue, to teach them more, show some videos, have a protest, et cetera, et cetera. So those are just a few ideas.
Thank you, Bruce. And please do look at the chat for all the links that are there, and use them. Use them lots. They're all very, very interesting. So remember that's space for peace. That's space for number 4 peace.org. Have a really good look at the amazing amount of materials that are on there. And there's a newsletter, there's Bruce's organization notes, there's all sorts of things which from time to time I do read because they're really interesting. So, and Tamara has also said, before I go to you on this particular question, that her slideshow will be available if you email her. So, Tamara, can I move to you to talk now about to answer the question, actually, which I've almost forgotten what it is. Shall I refresh you?
If I can just add to what Bruce said, that it's really important that we inform ourselves, that we help raise awareness in our communities, and that we are in solidarity, because this struggle is not just in the United States or in Canada or in Sweden. It's all over the world. It's in South Korea, it's in Japan. So we really need to change course from this militarized direction that we're moving in, led by the United States and NATO, and move in this direction of peace. This is really critical for planetary survival and for our children's future. It's really, really so urgent. We cannot, in Canada, go from currently $44 billion a year on the military in the next decade to $150 billion a year on the military. The Carney government just introduced into the House of Commons its budget, and that's what it will mean, reaching NATO's 5% GDP target, spending $150 billion on the military. It will cause massive cuts to social and environmental programs. So people need to know that there is a direct impact from all of this militarization on their lives and on their children's future. It will mean, investing in Golden Dome and radar systems means not investing adequately in healthcare, education, and housing. And for those of you who are not in Canada, we have homeless encampments all across the country. Right now in my city, it's minus 10 degrees, and there's a huge tent encampment. This is all across Canada. So we need to really question, why is it that our country that our Prime Minister is prioritizing militarization that will enrich he and his friends, because Mark Carney is heavily invested in BAE, Lockheed Martin. You can look at his conflict of interest ethics report that he submitted to Parliament. He and his friends are going to be enriched from this, but it means impoverishing all of us. So we need to get this message out to Canadians, because this drive for militarization and war really needs to stop. But the peace communities, both in the United States and Canada, need your support and need your solidarity.
Thanks, Tamara. Agneta.
Yes, I would like to comment about that we have space, and then we have the so-called ordinary war. I used to say space is used in all aspects. You can't just say, then we have space. Oh, like he says, everything is used, so-called conventional wars, they say. Space is involved. That I want to go against this myth that we hear now. We are talking about space, and then we go on and talk about the military. Space is everywhere, everything, every rocket, everything that is launched. The first space war was in Iraq War 1991, when they used space. The US used space, and the next space war was 2003. And they had to have so-called embedded journalists, so they shouldn't understand how the war was launched, because we have PAROS, Prevention of Arms Race in Outer Space. And they didn't want to reveal that they used space. So we have to go away from the myth that there is space war and then there are conventional war. They are wars, and space is used all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Agneta. Now, I understand some people been having a bit of trouble putting their question in the Q&A box. So I will move over to the chat, where Huhan has explained this and is curious to know how it unfolded that Australia got involved with Canada on the over-the-radar project. What is their stated motivation in this involvement that is on the other side of the world? This wraps the Asia-Pacific into the Arctic, a very unusual connection. So that is an interesting question. Bruce, are you able to answer that? And I'm sure you're able. Would you like to answer it?
Give me a second. I'm just reading the question.
It's from Kuhan.
Did you see
Maybe
Lisa Savage?
maybe Tamara should
Liza?
answer that because it's about Australia's connection to Canada. Why
Yeah.
don't you?
Yep. Okay, Tamara.
So, well, one of the reasons is because Australia has the system that Canada that wants to have as well. So the JORN system that's in Australia will be similar to this Arctic over the horizon radar that will be, established in Ontario unless we can stop it. And one thing that I didn't say in my presentation, I did explain the space Arctic link, but actually, if you read the literature, it's also very much connected to the Indo-Pacific. So Australia has the JORN system for the Indo-Pacific, but it will also be because Canada and Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and the US are all part of the Five Eyes Alliance, which is the Anglo-American security intelligence apparatus there, that very secret intelligence sharing system, that these radar systems will be integrated and connected. So we've got the Arctic one in Canada, but it will be very much linked to the JORN system in Australia that will be targeting the Indo-Pacific, because as Bruce and I explained, this is part of global domination, global space superiority for the US and its close allies, and also to be able to enable global war. So and then just to add, I just want to also emphasize that the weapons contractors are BAE and Lockheed Martin in Australia. They'll be the same ones in Canada. And I think also one of the reasons why we're going with Australia as opposed to the US is that in Canada, because of Trump, Canadians are very reluctant to want to buy more American weapon systems. So now we're like saying we're partnering with Australia and we're partnering with Europe on weapons procurement. But either way, this is enriching the military industrial complex. We absolutely don't need it. And we need to work to stop it. And if I could also just finally say that I see some people had their hands up, like Lisa and I think Alice and Kohan. If it's possible for them to unmute and contribute, I think that might be really nice in our discussion as well, if there's time. Thanks.
Okay, fair enough. Well, we've got quite a lot to get through, and I don't really want the webinar to go on forever because I know people get tired. So we'll just move swiftly through if we can. And there is just one question that maybe Agneta could answer for us. Agneta, could you provide a view about the fact that the Swedish royals visited Canada and Mark Carney recently with businesses such as Saab in tow, and one of the Wallenbergs question mark selling arms as well, maybe. Do you have a comment on that, Agneta?
I didn't really get the question. What did you? It was too rapid for me. What did you want me to answer?
Okay, I'll rephrase it. There was a recent visit by the Swedish royals to Canada, and the question is really, do we think this was part of an arms selling and buying exercise?
I don't know. I don't think I know about it. I don't really understand what you are up to. That for sure. But maybe it is now for me, and it is alarming when I'm sitting here, I feel it. Because we have such a terrible rulers, government, and a terrible media. So I have stopped watching TV and media. So maybe this has just gone me like this. I'm sorry. I've stopped watching media, TV. I don't do that.
Fair enough. Okay, that's fair enough. But I mean, it's true that the royal families, such as they are used as political pawns.
Yeah.
Witness the horrifying sight of Trump having his second state visit in England, which just made us all cringe so much. And it's just, oh, yeah, it's so distasteful to see this sort of thing going on. But it's going on more and more. Um, Now, another question from Nydia Leaf saying the USA and other nations are relying on drones more and more. Please explain how space weaponry fits in with drone warfare. Is one lower orbit than the other? Wouldn't the operations conflict? Um, I think it is more to do with communication, but would one of our speakers like to take that? Tamara, have you got your hand up? Yeah.
Well, actually, I wanted to answer the previous question really quickly to just say that, yes, 2 weeks ago, the Swedish king and queen came to Ottawa on a 3-day visit. They were accompanied by a business delegation led by Marcus Wallenberg, the very, very wealthy Swedish industrialist that owns Saab. And it was to try to pressure Canada to replace some of the fleet of the F-35 that we announced that we were buying in 2023. We announced that we were going to buy 88 F-35 fighter jets, but there's been such a backlash in Canada towards Trump, and people are saying we want to scrap the fighter jet procurement entirely, and it's not even going to benefit Canada. Trump and Lockheed Martin can turn off the switch on these F-35s. So we need to look elsewhere. And this is one of the reasons why we're looking to European companies and the Gripen, the Saab Gripen, to replace part of that fighter jet fleet. And that's why the Swedish Royals were in town. But I just want us to reflect about the fact that the royal families are highly militarized and are used, for this weapons procurement. I mean, think about King Charles, his history of being a salesman for the big British weapons manufacturer BAE and selling arms to Saudi Arabia and all of these other Arab Gulf monarchies. So and then Canadians, need to think, why is it that we're still a constitutional monarchy with a king at the top? Why do we allow this political economic elite? These are the ones that are really benefiting from all of this war making and all of these weapons purchases. So this is another reason why we need to stop all of this. It's not to keep us safe; it's to enrich them.
Can I come in
Thank
here
you.
and can I just come in here and say something other that Sweden I've followed, that we arm. Sweden arms Ukraine, the Nazis in Ukraine. Sweden is #1 now, and it's never mentioned. That's what I know. Thank you.
Thank you, Agneta. And thank you, Tamara, for a very full answer to that question about the royal families. Now, I don't know if anybody did want to take on this connection between drones and the space weaponry. Bruce would like to. Thank you.
Yeah, I could just say very briefly, drones are cheaper as a weapon system, much, much cheaper, smaller, easier to use, but they're also controlled by satellite technology ultimately. And so that's a key link there. But essentially, they're looking for ways continually to cut the costs of warfare. And drones, robotics, all those things are a big source now. I also want to answer one of the other questions. Somebody basically asked, what is the Achilles heel, essentially, of Golden Dome? Well, the answer is the cost, the enormous cost. And that's why, as Tamara's already said, we have to link social spending, environmental spending cuts to plans to weaponize space, plans for Golden Dome and stuff like that. They're totally linked. One other thing I want to say is imagine all the Golden Dome interceptors up there. I think there's another reason that we haven't even talked about yet. And it's something I learned about from a 1989 congressional study called Military Space Forces in the Next 50 Years. And in there, they said that someday we're going to go out and mine the sky, and we've got to be able to hijack rival shipments upon return. So if some country or corporation that's not authorized tries to go out and mine the sky, and we want to take them out, we need to control the Earth-Moon gravity well, they call it, the on and off front gate, if you will, of the Earth. And so I think if the United States successfully, with its allies, puts all these interceptors in lower Earth orbit, they would essentially have control over which country, which corporation could go off into space to mine the sky. And so I think that's another reason for all of this Golden Dome, and something we should watch very closely.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right. We just take a couple more questions. One, which is an interesting one, although people like me have been banging their heads against the brick wall of getting journalists to cover these issues. The question is, it's becoming more dangerous to protest, and police are becoming more violent, as well as targeting and raiding homes at dawn and so on. Just here in the UK, Palestine Action, which was a non-violent protest group, has been prescribed as a terrorist organization, and I think 1,600 people have been arrested so far for just carrying a piece of cardboard saying, I support Palestine Action. So the authorities are upping the ante on all these protests. But the question is about journalists and how to get them to cover. I mean, I shall hazard a guess myself to say, really, we have alternative media, which we really, really need to look after. But I don't know if any of the other panelists would like to answer that question about journalism.
Well, can I actually say something about what happened to some Canadian activists a week and a half ago? There were 5 Canadian peace activists who had protested in September the big arms fair in London, Ontario, and they blocked the doors of this weapons fair. And 5 of them, on November 25th, the police raided their homes, took all of their devices. So people like, Rachel Small with World Beyond War, and David Heap, who's a professor at the local university. He's also with People for Peace London. And people like him have been charged and have had all of their device taken by the police. And so we're going to see this militarization, not just outwards, not just in the space in the Arctic and against other countries, but it's also very much being turned inwards, being turned against us, trying to resist all of this arms deals and weapons fairs and all this kind of thing. But, we need to just continue to stand our ground because we're doing the right thing. And we do need independent journalism to help raise awareness because our mainstream media is really failing us. They're enabling all of this war making and arms deals. And so we need to, share good independent journalistic sources that we can use. I think that Lisa Savage wanted to try to make a comment too. She's had her hand up for a while.
Yes, I realise that there have been quite a few hands up, but I'm trying to offer the questions to the panelists because they're the people who have been, they're the ones the audience wants to hear from, to be honest. But I have much respect for Lisa anyway. I think Agneta would like to answer something.
I think we should remember Udo Olfkotte, the German journalist who revealed how you have read him, I understand, Udo Olfkotte, a German journalist who told in public how journalists were paid to write the right things. So he's dead now. But I think he was a good example of how you dare to go out and say, I was paid for years to write what I did. So that's what I wanted to add to this discussion about journalism. And it also follows that I didn't understand what you questioned because I sort of stopped watching anything or reading it. It's not good. But I'm a victim of this. Media is trying to not kill me, but tell me the wrong things, and that I don't want. So thank you.
Thank you, Agneta. I'm just going to run through now because I think we should finish up very, very soon. The comments that we made, for example, that savagery has been normalized. We've been watching the horrors of genocide being normalized. If you stop to think about it, this is not good for the prospects of the future for humanity. There are many, many people saying thank you. That they would like to organize a non-violent civil defense instead of relying on missiles and space war. A few more, many thank yous. And Bruce, you've made a comment which I'd like to read out, actually, and which is that why aren't we talking up the constant proposals from China and Russia to negotiate treaties to keep weapons out of space? At the 80th anniversary of World War II, they actually pledged never to be the first to use weapons or put weapons in space. This should be mentioned over and over. No one is aware of the offer on the table for years. And yes, I agree. These
Actually,
things are.
actually, I didn't write that. One of the people that entered with my name, it's probably
one of your
Alice.
clones.
It's probably Alice Slater, one of our board members. If we could maybe bring her up and let her express that, because it's her big issue that she talks about more than any of the rest of us. So
Right.
if you
Where
could,
are you, Alice?
can you ask her to put her hand up?
Yeah, Alice, can you put your hand up?
There she is.
Are you Bruce again? Okay. Shall
Yes.
I unmute you? And I'll put your video up as
Here
well.
I
Hello,
am.
Alice.
Hello.
There's so many Bruce clones tonight. It's
I hear.
not
I
easy.
see. I mean, I know Bruce raised it. He put an article that I wrote. He printed it in the New Space newsletter. I just think that when we start out talking about all the horrible things that all the white corporate patriarchy is doing to create war in space, we should always say that Russia and China put a treaty on the table and they keep begging us to negotiate, and they have pledged never to be the first to put weapons or war in space. They actually gave a pledge. I gave the link to their talk that they gave on the 80th anniversary of World War II. And of course, part of the white corporate patriarchy is always denigrating Russia and China, and making them the enemy. But, no matter what you think of Russia or China, you can't deny what they're saying. And for us in the space network, I think that should be like over and over again till people get it. It's never in what Ray McGovern calls the Mickey Mat, the military, industrial, congressional, intelligence, media, academic think tank complex that's brainwashing the whole world right now. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Alice.
People,
Really, thank you.
Could we also go to our board member and part-time staffer in the Global Network, Lisa Savage, and see what she wanted to say? I'm really anxious to hear what she has to say.
That's great. Thank you. All I'm seeing is Bruce Gagnon's, but
there she is. There she is.
I'm here.
Here she is.
Thanks, everybody. What a great presentation. I was wanting to respond to the first question that was asked, which was basically a communications question. How do we deal with the glamorization of space that's constantly, bombarding our societies and young people? And as a retired school teacher, I thought about that a lot when I was a teacher. So I was just weighing in. One point that I'll share, I typed an answer to Margaret, who posed that question. But one term that I'll share that Bruce and I learned from a very experienced, much younger environmental organizer here in Maine, when we were organizing to resist the building of a rocket launch site. The people that wanted to build it called it a spaceport. And this organizer said to us, I have noticed that they never say the words rocket or launch. They always use spaceport. She even guessed that maybe they had done some, focus groups or some kind of consumer research to see how people responded to the different terms. So we added the word toxic to rocket launch site and went with that and never called it a spaceport. I think being attuned to the connotations of the words that are used to promote space. I've for years been in America, this is maybe more effective than it might be elsewhere, said to people, any space program is military in nature. I don't care what NASA says about it, look into it. You will find out that it is actually intended for military application. Maybe people don't care anymore because they want war in space now. I don't know. But anyway, those were my thoughts from a communication angle.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And Tamara, I think I'm going to let you have the last word.
Well, I just want to stress with everyone that we have the tools and the architecture to, have peace in this world, to have peace in space, to have peace in the Arctic, to have peace in the oceans. Like I'm thinking about the fact that that Russia, China, and Canada, most of the other Arctic countries, except the United States, have ratified the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which it provides the architecture to resolve all conflict in the marine environment in a peaceful way. And just as Alice explained, there are these resolutions that China and Russia have brought forward to the United Nations for peace in space. And I also want to bring to your attention that China has this really important document called the 5 Principles of Peaceful Coexistence. I encourage you to read it. China is not our enemy. Russia is not our enemy. I encourage people to go to these countries and find ways to build peace. They're our neighbors. They share the planet with us. Our governments and our media are really failing us by giving us these enemy pictures of these countries. It's absolutely not the case. We could be partnering, for instance, with China on high-speed rail in Canada. That's what we need. There isn't 1 kilometer of high-speed rail in Canada or the United States. We don't need Golden Dome. We need high-speed rail. And everybody who's on this call from Canada, especially Ontario, knows how we desperately need advanced modern public transit, something that we don't have in Canada. So friends, we need to transcend. We need to transcend the enmity that we are getting from our governments and from our media. We need to peace build in all regions, the Arctic and in space, and with all countries. They are not our enemies. And this is the best solution for our children and for our future. So thanks very much, Pipa, and everyone for coming and for organizing this call. I'll leave it to you, Pipa, now.
Thank you. Oh gosh, thank you, all of you. Of course, we want a peaceful world. That's what all this is about. They're arming you, in a sense, with the weapons, in a sense, to fight the patriarchy, to fight the growing fascism, to fight the capitalism, which is leeching money out of our communities. Of course, we want a peaceful world. It's a prosperous world, a peaceful world. And we have to teach our children to question more, question what the mainstream news and media is saying, to try to look behind the statements and understand how the world is really going round. And we must help young people to do that. And although they're so beleaguered with their huge grant, outstanding money in most Western countries now, these kids are expected to pay for their education, they're expected to pay for their healthcare, they're expected to pay for everything which should be free. And the only reason they are not free is because the amount of money being spent on the military. So thank you so much for everyone who came, everyone who took part, our wonderful panelists, for a great webinar. It will be available on the Global Women United Against NATO website and YouTube channel. And everyone who has registered will get a copy of this recording in, well, probably sometime tomorrow. Okay, so once again, a huge, huge thanks for everyone who took part. It's been a great webinar. Good night,
Thank you very
everyone.
much. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Bye.
Bye.